The next morning, Krista waited on the corner of 5th and 64th. Much to her surprise, she stood alone. Well, not alone. People walked by, but few paid her any attention. Cars crowded the street. The drivers honked and cursed to show their impatience. Some drivers leaned out of their windows and yelled at pedestrians or waved their fists. Bike messengers zigzagged on and off the sidewalk and in and out of stopped traffic. She checked her watch for the 100th time in the last half hour. 2 minutes till 9. What was Jonah's problem? Krista rolled her eyes. Maybe she'd only fooled herself into believing Jonah might help her. She'd waited long enough. A breeze made her shiver, and Krista instinctively pulled her jacket tighter. A wave of discouragement slumped her shoulders as her hands dropped to her sides. Jonah had been her last hope. Now she had no choice but to leave everything concerning her husband's case to the police. Krista stuffed her hands in her pockets and headed south. Maybe the information was too hard to come by. Her cheek twisted in a smile. Maybe Jonah bit off more than he could chew. He thought he could do anything until he hit a fork in the road and refused to show up to a meeting to admit his faults. "Sorry, I'm late." Krista gasped and jumped to the right. She twisted so sharply into the direction of the sound, a sharp pain streaked through her back. "Mother of Mary," she breathed, her eyes locked on Jonah. "You scared the daylights out of me." "I know," Jonah said. "You're not very aware of your surroundings. It allows people to sneak up on you." "What?" She narrowed her eyes. "How long have you been back there?" He placed his hand on her lower back and guided her to the corner. "Long enough," he answered. He led her to a set of steel bars. The small shop was blocked by a plastic tarp billowing in the breeze. Jonah took out a key. He unlocked the gate and pushed it up. He grabbed the lower corner of the plastic and raised it high enough for both of them to duck under. After he unlocked the glass door, he held it open for Krista. "Waiting on you now." Krista ducked under the folded piece of plastic and stepped past him into the building. She heard the gate rattle back down and the door click closed. Jonah flicked on a battery-powered generator hooked to 4 yellow garage lights that hung from exposed beams above missing ceiling tiles. The hum of the generator blocked any outside noise. The thick plastic tarp covered their bodies from anyone who might peek through the window. Krista pushed those thoughts away. Each new day took her a little farther from her comfort zone. The building was exactly as Jonah had described, an old coffee shop that looked like it paused in the middle of a renovation and never restarted. Rows of tables lined the floor. Metal tables with a wavy contemporary design that had never been used were left alone and ignored to collect a thick layer of dust. Around each table were 4 matching dusty metal chairs with a brick-red foam cushion. The garage lights positioned above her formed a square in roughly the center of the room, each one connected to an extension cord leading to the generator. "So," Jonah started their conversation casually, "you have a daughter." Krista fought a sudden wave of shock. Jonah had her attention. "What? A daughter," he said again. "Alexis." It was a statement, not a question. Fear, anger, and the violation of her personal life, Krista pushed it all down and tried to answer casually. "Yeah? So?" Jonah walked over to the counter and pushed aside a piece of plastic covered in dust. He turned, placed his hands on the edge, and pulled himself up to sit in an open area where a cash register would go. "You never said you had a daughter." Krista wrung her hands together. She wasn't comfortable with a lot of questions concerning her child. "I didn't see where it mattered." "Well, it does." "What do you mean?" she asked, unsure why Jonah was so interested in Alexis. His voice stayed calm, but his expression shifted to very serious. "I have the information you asked for. I'm going to ask you a question. I want an honest answer, and I will know if you're lying. What exactly do you plan on doing with this information once you have it?" "I plan on investigating it." "By yourself?" "Maybe." Krista jutted her chin out in determination, or defiance. She wasn't sure which one, but she refused to be intimidated. "If that's what it takes," he had the audacity to chuckle at her, "then I won't give it to you." "What? Why?" Krista's defiance melted into frustration. What's wrong with him? Why did he insist on wasting her time? She didn't have the energy to run all over the city and play his games. "I don't get it. You said you'd help me." "I am," he said quickly. I'm going to help you by giving you information. It just isn't the information you asked for. Why not just give me the information I asked for? Too dangerous. Are you going to explain why you think it's too dangerous? Of course. First of all, your life is your business. I don't mind sending a foolish wife after a runaway husband. However, sending a young mother to get herself killed is another story. Krista didn't miss the subtle wording he used to describe her. I'm not foolish. When I asked for your help, I never said anything about needing extra concern about my personal safety. Maybe not, Jonah agreed. You also didn't ask for help last night when I chased those kids away. Krista opened her mouth to argue, but she couldn't form the words. Damn him. Jonah had a habit of being right. Her mouth closed as she lowered her eyes to the floor. I just want to know where Christian is. That's what I want to talk to you about. I don't think you understand what's going on here. He leaned forward, placed his palms on the counter on either side of him, and crossed his ankles. Your husband isn't the man you think he is. She sighed. Who do I think he is? Jonah seemed to enjoy watching her frustration mount. If I had to guess, I would say you think he's a temperamental guy by nature. Maybe he got overwhelmed with his life and had problems taking care of a young child. He snapped when your father confronted him. There was a struggle, a gun fired, and your father ended up dead. Christian panicked and left. Now he's on the run. Krista narrowed her eyes. Damn him. That is what she thought. Well, she said slowly, that is what happened. No. Jonah's answer was quick. Certain. Not even close. You're telling me you know what happened, she shot at him. You weren't there. You weren't there either, he blatantly pointed out. You were in the hospital because you fell down a flight of stairs and fractured your skull. Shock forced Krista to retreat until her back bumped into the table behind her. Jonah thought that's what happened because that's what she put in the hospital's records. She suddenly felt very vulnerable. If this man could gain access to medical records, no piece of her life was safe from him. Nick was right. Jonah knew his way around information. Do you want to hear what I have to say? He asked. Krista offered a slow nod. Christian Adams, as you know him, is Andrew Kane by birth and has gone by the names Helvas, Jeffers, Thompson, Middleton, then Adams, and most recently Williams. You know the last one because you dug that information up yourself. Jonah kept his gaze on her and nodded approvingly. Impressive. She didn't know what to think. Krista didn't want to believe her husband had so many other identities. In her heart, she knew it could be true. Was it that simple to start his life over with a new name? It wasn't hard to believe. He had planned to do it again with Adrian Nichols. A churning in her stomach made her nauseous. Krista took slow, controlled breaths to calm herself. She couldn't be sick, not here, not in front of Jonah. Running it through her mind again, it all made sense. Her hand shook as she covered her mouth. It had to be true. Christian simply cast aside his wife and child like yesterday's leftovers. Are you okay? Jonah's question came to her from 100 miles away. The concern in his voice caught her off guard. Krista pulled her thoughts together. When she finally spoke, her voice barely rose above a whisper. How do you know all this? The concern disappeared. It's what I do. Would you like to hear the rest? Krista did her best to mentally prepare for what he might say. Yes. All right. Jonah adjusted his position, unlocked his ankles, and folded his hands in his lap. Your father was Christian's 9th known murder in 6 years. There are warrants out for him in New York, New Jersey, New Hampshire, and Rhode Island, all under different names. He has felonies for domestic abuse and restraining orders from 2 different women, one here and one in New Jersey. Jonah locked eyes with her and shrugged. Your name wasn't on that list, so I guess you lucked out on that one. No. Krista's breath caught, and the sickness returned as a swell in the pit of her stomach. She wasn't lucky, just too stupid to report him. She turned away from Jonah when water welled in her eyes. Don't cry, she told herself. Not in front of him. She swallowed hard and pressed her lips together to keep them from trembling. A sniffle escaped her. It didn't seem to bother Jonah. Never married, he continued, except for you. He has no children other than your daughter and recently fled from an apartment in Brooklyn Heights. I know. Krista cursed her voice for cracking. I talked to his girlfriend. Yes, well, judging from his past activities, he's done this before. He's too smart to go back to Brooklyn. Is he still in the city? Yes. Krista jumped and turned. Jonah stood an arm's length from her, tissue in hand. How did he move around so quickly without making a sound? She accepted the Kleenex and dabbed her eyes. Manhattan? Yes. Where? He smiled. Can't tell you that. Why not? I already told you, it's too dangerous for you to pursue. You should let me judge that. Again, he had the nerve to laugh at her. No, you don't judge situations very well. Krista's anger flared. Just what the hell is that supposed to mean? The smile faded. He turned away and started to pace. More than once, you've misjudged the safety of the streets. You walk around unarmed without a care in the world. You're not prepared to be in a potentially dangerous situation. Hell, in the last 2 days, I've snuck up on you 3 times, and before that, James Tillis and his gang caught you twice. Actually, Krista argued, the first time, they just walked by. I was in the wrong place at the wrong time. You're missing the point. You're a mother, not a hunter. You are not trained to go after a man who is not going to think twice about killing you. I'm not about to let a child lose her mother over a personal grudge. It isn't worth it. Personal grudge? This wasn't a marital dispute. Christian murdered her father and threatened to kill again. Why was Jonah being so difficult? Damn it, you don't understand. Tears threatened to fall. She didn't care anymore. Her voice rose as her anger hit a boiling point. He'll come back. My family isn't safe. Jonah clenched his jaw. You don't know that. You don't know him. This is absurd, Jonah shot back. He turned his back on her to continue pacing. I didn't tell you this to give you another reason to go after him. I told you because I know you're pursuing him. This information is supposed to open your eyes. It's entirely too dangerous for someone like you. I told you to let me be the judge of. In one sudden movement, Jonah twisted 180 degrees and swung his arm. In 3 quick steps, he closed the gap between them. Krista's heart stopped. It hardened into a chunk of stone in her chest. He was angry. The fire in his eyes and the red hue tinting his cheeks brought the memories screaming back. Krista automatically retreated. She needed to anticipate his next move. Her backside was already against the table. She needed another route, but couldn't look away. Jonah moved too fast for her to escape. Why don't you just go? The familiarity of it terrified her. Krista had crossed that fragile line she tiptoed for so many years. Once again, Christian was angry and stood over her. She clenched her teeth, squeezed her eyes shut, and raised her forearm to protect her face. Her body went numb, a silent message coursing through her veins. It warned her to prepare for the worst. Jonah stopped close enough for her to feel his warm breath blow against the sleeve covering the underside of her forearm. When she felt nothing but his breath, she opened her eyes. He stood, his arm extended over her shoulder as he pointed toward the door. The anger faded, and his expression had become serious. Krista suddenly felt very foolish. The pounding in her chest was enough to let her know her heart had started working again. As easily as flicking a switch, Jonah had revealed her secrets, and all he did was gesture toward the street. It made sense as she followed the motion. Jonah never meant to harm her. He probably wanted to tell her to go home, to let the police handle it. In a flash, the situation had changed. She saw it written on his face. That moment, she'd flinched to protect herself from a blow he never intended to deliver. Jonah lowered his hand to his side. Behind those stony eyes, she saw something else, a look she recognized from others, strangers who saw her bruises. It was always the same look from people in the store, the bank, the laundry room, and even from her parents. Pity was fairly easy to recognize. The slight crease between the eyebrows, the tightened jaw. It had been a while, but Krista still recognized pity. She didn't need pity. Did he? Jonah's eyes cut into her. Like knives, they sliced through her fragile defenses. He didn't need to finish the sentence. They both knew the answer. All she had to do was think about it. Hot tears slid down her cheeks. Krista couldn't stop them once they started. Ashamed of her past, she looked away from his penetrating gaze. I will find him. She forced anger and confidence into the words. With or without your help. Jonah offered her a second Kleenex. If he can hide from the police, he can hide from you. But he can't hide from you. She looked at the tissue as if it were a foreign object. Where did he keep a box of tissues? She accepted it after he bounced it in front of her. Jonah waited until she dried her cheeks. If I tell you where he is, what are you going to do? Tell the police. Krista hesitated. Yes. Don't lie to me. The police aren't interested in what you have to say. He crossed his arms over his chest. So what are you going to do? Go after him yourself? She shrugged a single shoulder, a small, pitiful movement that added to her earlier moment of embarrassment. Jonah watched her. What do you plan on doing when you go after him? Krista remained silent. She stared at the dusty tabletop as he judged her. If she waited long enough, Jonah would reveal his conclusions. He'd let her know just why she wasn't worthy of the information she so desperately wanted. Let's say you do find him. Are you going to run from him? Duck and cower, afraid to fight? Because let me tell you something, you're not going to win a fight with your arm covering your face. From what I've seen, Christian isn't afraid to fight. He's not going to run if you stand in his way. He's not going to let you call the police so they can take him to jail. He's going to kill you, and there is no other way around it. Jonah huffed, the period on his point. You're not prepared to fight someone with more confidence than you. Then, how do I prepare? The words left her lips before she considered the implications of what they might mean. Krista didn't want to admit it, but everything he said made sense. Her plan was a suicide mission. When Jonah's silence reached unforgiving, she raised her eyes to him. A sly smile played on his lips. Are you serious? Was she? If she wanted to find Christian, she needed to be prepared to face him, and she wanted to find Christian. Krista locked eyes with him. Yes. You're not going to let this go, are you? Help me. Krista held his gaze. She almost saw how his mind worked. He contemplated the pros and cons of helping her. She tried to sweeten the bargain. Please. All right, let's make a deal. I'll start teaching you how to confront your husband, and if you make it through the training to a point where I think you're ready, I'll give you the information. Was he serious? How hard could that be? If you quit, Jonah crossed his arms over his chest. Then you go home without your information and you leave this hunt for someone else. Krista let the terms run through her head. A little bit of training and he would give up the information. It sounded almost too good to be true. Jonah arched his brow. So, Krista smiled. Okay, let's do this. The corner of Jonah's lip curled. Don't get too excited. I doubt you'll make it 2 weeks.